Okay, I'm here to discuss the steps I went through to assemble a portable Winlink system for HF. Discuss why I did things the way I did, some of the things that affected my decisions to do things the way that I did them. And I'm going to start with a disclaimer that says, again, the ideas and opinions expressed herein are mine solely, those of the author. You can have different opinions and ideas, and that's just perfectly fine. I welcome that. This is meant to be uh, a place for exchanging some ideas and possibly sharing some ideas that you have, uh, better ways to do things. Yeah, I've gone through this project based on my own assumptions and requirements, so your requirements may differ. And one of the goals that I was after was essentially using things that I had on hand that I didn't have to purchase, keeping that to a minimum, the purchases that I made. So your mileage may vary from what I've got here. So let's start out with this. As you know, Winlink Express has become it's a go-to tool for emergency communications. It's become a in the last few years has become quite popular. It certainly has in our area here, where we live. Uh, there's some good reasons for that. One is that it reduces errors common to voice circuits. Voice circuits, maybe on 2 meters FM or on HF, they are prone to errors. It's not 100% perfect. Nothing really is 100% perfect. But WinLink definitely reduces that as digital. It's also once you've got the basics down, it's very easy to set up and operate, and it has a very rapid learning curve, which is one of the things I really like about it. It requires very little support. One of the really nice features of WinLink is the fact that it has the built-in FEMA and hospital forms, the ICS and HICS forms built in, and these are to reduce, these greatly reduce your workload. You directly input information into the system, which is really nice. And makes things much easier on the operators. On the other hand, WinLink's stations are generally located at the home operating position. They certainly are for me and have been since I've been using it. They're not easily transportable, because typically it's a desktop computer and it might be a radio and your antennas and all this. It's not really a portable system right out of the gate. But I want to know, what does it take to make it really portable? What can we do to make a portable system, and how difficult is it? And what are the things that we have to deal with in making a portable system? So the first thing you want to do is you want to look at your requirements. What are your requirements? Are you going to be on HF or VHF? I mean, this is going to determine a lot of things. It's going to determine the radio that you use, of course. It's going to determine antennas that you use, or antennas. It's going to determine what you use for a power source, and it may determine other things that you need. So in those requirements, we're going to look at operating mode and frequency, and it's going to be situation dependent. It's going to really be dependent on what you're trying to achieve. To whom are we trying to communicate? Is it close by, which of course would indicate a VHF system, or is it distant, which would point to an HF system? Some other factors: is the internet available at either end? In other words, if I have internet available here in my area, can I use a VHF system 2 meters to contact a local gateway, or can I use peer-to-peer for local communications, or even for long distance HF communications? Well, I'm going to talk about my case here. And the thing that we plan for is a total communications outage here in the Indian Wells Valley where we live. And this is going to be no phones, which means no landline or cellular telephones, no internet connectivity, complete communications outage, affecting everyone, affecting our AHJs, which happen to be Ridgecrest Regional Hospital, which heavily depends on internet and telephones, and our local EOC at Ridgecrest Police Department, which also depends heavily on phones and internet. So here's my test case, total communications outage. So let me talk about our situation a little bit and where we are. This is Eastern Kern County. We're the Eastern Kern County area ARES group here. And we're in an isolated valley surrounded by mountains on all four sides. And in particular, on our western boundary, we're located located near the eastern side of the Sierra Nevada mountains here in Southern California. Our Kern County EOC happens to be on the other side of those mountains. Problem we face is that there's no real good path for communications between our location here and the Kern County EOC that's 100% reliable. We have some repeaters that have some coverage, limited coverage here in the valley that can allow us to communicate with Bakersfield, but it is limited coverage. HF has proven to be ineffective in the past. We, as a good example, when we had our earthquakes here, you may remember in 2019 we had a series of major earthquakes here in the valley, a 6.4 followed by a 7.1 magnitude earthquake, and literally thousands of aftershocks. In attempting to communicate with the EOC, HF was not usable to us. I think that had we had access to some other bands, like 160 meters, for instance, I think we probably could have had reasonable communications with the EOC on 160 at night, but the EOC had no capabilities on 160 meters. So this became a non-starter. The EOC is supported by the Western Kern County areas, our counterparts on the other side of the mountains. So we've been looking for a common tool that we can use. Western Kern County does use Winlink. They've been using it for some time, and we here in the Eastern Kern County have started using it in more recent times as well. So resources are available on either side of the mountains. So our solution is actually at this point Winlink on HF using remote gateways, RMS gateways. They've been effective. We do actually conduct monthly tests of Winlink on HF between our group here in the Eastern Kern County and the folks in Western Kern County, as well as the disaster management individuals at the Kern County EOC and at our hospital here, Ridgecrest Regional, and our EOC here in Ridgecrest. So we prove that this system works on a regular basis, and we do that by sending out SMS text messages through the various cell providers or wireless providers' SMS gateways from email. So in other words, we send an email via Winlink to an SMS gateway number, which happens to be that individual's phone number at their gateway address. And so we do this, like I said, on a monthly basis. We test this and make sure everything is up and running, and we know what we're doing, and all that is has been really effective at doing this. So we do have an alerting system that is effective. The problem is it relies on our fixed home stations here in Eastern Kern County. In Western Kern County, they do have a system at the EOC, as well as the fact that we're sending them a message to their cell phone, which as long as the phone system is up on their side of the mountains, this will work. But we'd really like to have something portable, something that I can actually take to the EOC because we don't have a system at the EOC, or something that I can take to the hospital because we don't have a Winlink system at the hospital. So I want to take this show on the road, and my goal is to assemble a portable Winlink station for HF. Now, the neat thing about this is with the choices I've made, I can easily substitute a different radio and different antennas to be able to use this on VHF. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the current fixed situation that I have here, my current configuration at my home QTH. My home station for Winlink, consists of an IC7300 that I have dedicated to using on Winlink, a Comet CHA250B multiband vertical. And I will share that this antenna has gotten a lot of bad rap. It's not the most efficient thing. It is a compromised antenna. The thing I like about it is it doesn't require any tuner. I mean, I can just switch frequencies from one band to another, and I don't have to wait for an antenna tuner to do anything. I can just start transmitting immediately. The SWR is under 2-to-1 across the entire, all of the HF bands, amateur radio bands. I also have a 9700 that I use for 2 meters and 432 here. And I have that tied into a GP9, which is a dual band vertical. And this is the station I use. And of course, I was using an old Windows 7 machine to run Winlink on, which I've since upgraded. But I want to talk a little bit about this station. I've had this 7300, been using it since early 2017, just a short time after they came out. So I've got a lot of time on it. I've had that CHA 250B in the air since the summer of 2020. And I primarily use that with digital modes like Whisper and, of course, Winlink. I was using it with Whisper before I started using it with Winlink. That is my Whisper antenna for my Whisper beacon. And it's proven very effective for that. So I'm satisfied with that antenna. The 9700 I obtained in 2019. And I've had GP9. This particular GP9 has been up in the air here since early in 2013, but I've been using them for quite a long time. So I'm very happy with the GP9s from Comet. That's a nice antenna for 2 meters and 70 centimeters. That it gets used mainly for local FM nets, 2 meters, and doing weak signal work on VHF, sideband, what have you, JT modes. And of course, I use it for Winlink VARA on 2 meters using VARA FM using the 9700. So that's the current setup here that I use for my digital communications. So my first attempt, we decided we were going to try and run a Winlink station at Field Day last year. Why? Because we wanted to send some traffic, bonus points for sending messages via amateur radio. So we figure, okay, let's set up a system that we can use to originate traffic, and maybe have it as a dual use. We can use it for other activities on Field Day, another transmitter, say on HF or on VHF. So in this case, I took both the 9700 and the 7300 along on Field Day. But I put together a minimalist system, and this is a look at this is what I had on VHF side. So I've got the 9700 there, and using that with a 2 meter mag mount. The mag mount was sitting up on top of the shelter that we were underneath in the park here locally in Ridgecrest. And so we had some shade and trying to keep cool. We are in the desert. It's summertime. It is hot. So we want to find all the shade we can. You notice in the picture, there's some sunlight there. It wasn't exactly the coolest place to be, but that's what I used for 2 meters. And then on HF, I had the 7300 along with an inverted V that was suspended from our tower trailer that belongs to our club that we were using on Field Day. So I combined this. You see the computer display there. That's actually my whole computer. That thing there that says W6DQ-21, the keyboard, mouse, a little box on the base, and the monitor. That's my entire computer, and I'm using this mini PC that you can see there. It's actually stuck on the bottom of the monitor. They're connected together, mechanically fastened together. That little computer runs Windows 10. It was very inexpensive. I picked it up off of Amazon. I think it was around $140, $150. It comes with Windows 10. It uses a solid state disk drive. Windows is already installed. It's got a couple of USB ports. It's got a Wi-Fi interface internally, and I added a Bluetooth interface to a little dongle to get the keyboard and mouse on there. Now, the reason I went to this is one of our local areas members here, David, KC6UUR. I want to give him credit. He set up an RMS gateway here on 2 meters using essentially this same setup. And he told me about this, and I went, this is a great idea. It would make a very portable system. So I've got the computer, a little 8-inch HDMI display, a little LCD display. The whole thing runs off at 12 volts. Of course, the computer runs off of 5 volts. So I had to have a little inverter that you see there to drop the 12 volts down to 5 volts to power the computer. And the whole thing runs off of batteries, a couple of gel cells that a couple of solar cells to maintain the gel cells through the day. And in the end, this thing performed very well. I was on the air for 24 hours off this system. I was running Winlink on the VHF side, and using the HF side for CW on a couple of bands, and I think on 75 meters possibly, and 80 meters for CW and sideband. Memory serves, but yeah, it was a nice system, and it was very effective. I was able to successfully send a bunch of messages out for our bonus points through Dave's local 2-meter gateway, so it was perfect. So I was very happy with that. But there's some lessons learned that came out of this, and one of the things that came out is that, you know, compact system is great. It was very quick to set it up, get it on the air right away. It was great from that aspect. It was extremely portable. I had very low power consumption using those the little tiny miniature PC. 2 of those, one for each computer, one for each radio. And the cost performance was extremely low. Very minimal expense, a little bit of work to put them together, but very low expense. But like everything, there are downsides. The downside of this was that monitor, 8-inch monitor, was very difficult to see. It's very small. And in daylight, it was really tough to see it, even in the shade. So as great as this was for field day, in fact, I still may use these again in the future for field day. I left them all set up. There were downsides to it. So we had another opportunity come up this year, and it's a public service event that was hosted by the Kern County Office of Emergency Services here. They conducted a preparedness fair over in that city on the other side of the mountains called Bakersfield, which is where the EOC is located. But they invited us to come and present at the fair, do demonstrations and what have you. This is one of our I'll consider them our served agency. Really, our served agencies are our AHJs, like I mentioned, are our hospital here and the EOC here in Indian Wells Valley. But their chief requirement is to be able to communicate with that Kern County EOC. So the folks from OES are very important to us. And the fact that they invited us out to come and do a display and demonstrations at their fair was wonderful. They invited Eastern Kern County along with Western Kern County to the fair. And we've set up a couple of displays adjacent to each other, a couple of booths out there. And that was great. You know, we both deployed portable HF stations. Portable Winlink stations. Ours was an HF station. Theirs was a VHF station. One of the things we had to deal with was no mains power available, of course. So everything's run off of batteries. We were able to successfully exchange traffic with both Western Kern County ARRLs on HF. We sent traffic out on HF to an RMS gateway, and they picked it up from their local 2-meter gateway. We also managed to communicate with another group here in the region in the city of Los Angeles, who just happened to be having a emergency preparedness fair at the same time down in the western part of the San Fernando Valley down in LA. And one of their ARRLs teams was out there and had been set up, and we were able to send and receive traffic from the guys down there in LA on HF, which was fantastic. It was a great demo. So we were really happy about that. We were happy we were able to show that to the public, show that to our folks from the EOC. And of course, the fact that we were able to do this with the guys from Western Kern County was great. It was great to have some FaceTime between the two groups. And, you know, we haven't been able to do that for quite a while because of the pandemic. So for this opportunity, I put together a different Winlink station. I call this version 2. Again, I used that same radio, the Comet CHA 250 with the IC 7300. You know, that's really my go-to radio for this. I used the CHA 250 and I set that up on a speaker stand. If you're familiar with those, I've got some other pictures of that, but you can see it there in the background. There's my speaker stand holding up the vertical right there. And I've got a battery box holding it down as ballast to keep it from blowing away. That antenna is great because it covers 80 through 6 meters with no radials. So I just plop the thing down on the speaker stand and do something to keep it in place, and it's great for that. So I like that setup. For a computer this time, I used my TOUGHBOOK. If you're familiar with the Panasonic TOUGHBOOks, that's this guy right here. These are great little ruggedized computers that I've been using for many, many, many years, and decided to try using one for this application. I hadn't used it for Winlink before, so I gave that a shot. And this guy was bundled with Windows 10. Again, had it all set up with VARA HF and VARA FM on it, and Winlink Express. All of that was all set up. I used batteries basically was using batteries that were located in cases. I will explain that, why they're in cases. Some years ago, well, one of the things I am involved in over years is microwave contesting. And when you're microwave contesting, you're generally portable. You're out roving around. And we happen to operate in some Forest Service land, both state parks and national parks here in California. And a couple of our guys have been hassled in the past for having batteries just sitting on the ground. So they were told by the rangers that, oh yeah, that battery, even though they're sealed, maybe sealed lead acid batteries or gel cells, they still have to be in a case. So I put together a small case using an Igloo Lunchmate with a gel cell in it, and used that for years as a portable battery, easy to carry, and all of that. So when I did this system, I needed a little bit more than my little gel cell and the ones I used for field day. I needed a little bit more capacity. So I used some Optima AGM deep cycle batteries that I had on hand here and bought cases. That was my first expense, getting some cases for them. So it'd be easier to carry those things around and make them legal if we happen to operate somewhere where they want us to be in a case. But the batteries were great because I was able to use my spare battery. I had two. One was running the setup here, but the other one was being used as an anchor. I used a couple of bungee cords to hold the speaker tripod down, the speaker stand, so that it wouldn't blow away. Because that antenna is fairly, it's got some fairly decent wind area, and if we happen to encounter some winds, it could blow over, and I didn't want that to happen. And that battery does a great job because they are heavy. So we have the thing anchored down, and also I added a little 110, 115 volt inverter, and I wanted that because I wasn't sure about the battery life on the computer. This event was a 4-hour event, and I figured, yeah, the batteries will probably last through the event, but in the event that they didn't, I wanted some backup so that I could keep the computer going, because I didn't have a spare battery for this computer. And of course, because I've got all this stuff, I added a wagon that I happen to have here for mobility, to be able to move this stuff around, because I couldn't park right next to where we're set up, and I had a lot of stuff to move. So this is what we looked like. This is the two booths set up next to each other, Western Kern County on the right and Eastern Kern County on the left. And you can see our little Winlink station. There's the TOUGHBOOK, there's the radio, and there's that CHA 250 in the background. The batteries are here in this cart, except for the one that's holding the stand down. So that's how we were set up at the fair. So again, lessons learned. The positive things about this. What have we got on the positive side? Well, that CHA 250B, I really like that for a portable antenna. It's lightweight. It is assembled in minutes. It just goes together with some bolts with wing nuts that just screw it together, and a couple of screws, Phillips head screws. And the way I set the thing up, I put well, you'll see in the close-up photos, it just slips over the top of the speaker stand, so I don't need any tools to mount the thing. I don't need a wrench or anything to mount the antenna. It has no radials. It's got a very small footprint. And of course, because it's easy to put together, it can be put together quickly. I can have very rapid deployment of the system. And of course, the 7300, again, this is a simple setup to use Winlink and Vara. It's very, very simple to set up. It practically does it itself, using the internal sound card on the radio with the USB interface. It's just very, very simple to set that up. So my concerns about battery life, 4 hours of continuous operating, no problem at all. The system, we ran this thing for actually over 4 hours, and the voltage drop was very small on the batteries. The batteries maintained their capacity over that time, so that was good. But of course, like anything, there are negatives to this setup. I was dealing with the CHA250B. Okay, I mentioned before, it is a compromised antenna. It doesn't have the greatest efficiency. The things that I know about it is it works much better if it's higher. So the higher you can get it off the ground, the much better it's going to function. Here at home, the base was about 10 feet off the ground here, mounted on a pole that I have. It's pretty easy to extend that speaker stand up in the air with some tubing. And I happen to have some aluminum masts that I can extend it with. In fact, that's what I used to make my mount for the speaker stand, was using an old piece of a scrap of an old antenna, aluminum antenna pole that I had here. But it is a compromise, like I say. It's not the most efficient, but I've got a lot of mileage with it here at the home QTH, so I'm pretty happy with how it performs. One of the examples I will use is that we'll mention that in terms of being a compromised antenna, I surprised myself one day when I was doing some testing with the new computer I'm using here, using the 7300 with the CHA250, and I was just testing the interface to see that everything was working okay. And so rather than transmitting, I turned the RF gain, the RF output level on the 7300 down as low as it would go. It doesn't go down to 0, but it goes down pretty low. And I imagine it was maybe just a couple of watts, if that, on the output. Tied into the CHA250, I just hit the start on Winlink. Happened to be set up with a gateway that I use regularly down in the LA area. That's probably about 120, 130 miles away, and immediately connected to it. And it just surprised the heck out of me when that happened. And I had a very, very reliable connection, very high speed connection with the gateway down there, KN6BKT's gateway down in LA. So I was really thrilled about that. That was really cool. But it surprised me, since I had the RF gain. I had to double check. The RF gain was down all the way. So I was running very, very low power. So that kind of nailed the 250 for me, this thing works really well for my situation that I'm trying to do. So it's a negative, but it was also a positive. The negative of it is that it is an inefficient antenna, but it works. And of course, the batteries, I'm using those Optima AGM cycle batteries. Each of those batteries weighs over 38 pounds. I've got 2 of them. They're heavy to move around, and I'm no spring chicken. It's getting tougher and tougher to move stuff like that, which is why I've got the little wagon. But the spare battery served as a great anchor, and if I ran one battery down, I just swap them out and keep going. So that wagon came in great handy for moving those batteries around. The TOUGHBOOK. Well, the TOUGHBOOK's a great little computer, and I've been using these things for many years through work. Before I retired, I was using them, deploying them into the field in a proof of concept program that I worked on years ago. And so I do like them. They're very rugged. This is a great application for them. Again, it's a little bit bigger than the little 8-inch HDMI display that I use, but it's still a small display. And it's kind of tough to see it in the daylight. But it worked just fine. I was really pleased with the results, but I wanted to look for something better. So I went home. Well, actually, this is what the system looks like as deployed right there. The cart, little wagon, little tractor supply wagon. You can see there's the speaker stand right there. The antennas here, pieces of the antenna. I've got one of the battery boxes there. in the background. You can see this Pelican case. That's where I have the computer and radio and a bunch of cables in that case. I also have a comfortable chair, and there's even a table in here that's folded up along with my bungee cords. They're all there in that picture. That's the whole station right there, everything I need. So I mentioned everything fits in a single case, the radio and computer. And this is what the thing looks like. So I've got a Dell, I switched over to using a Dell laptop. That's my current setup. It's a much bigger display. It's a 16-inch display. I'm really happy with this computer. This is another one I've had for a long, long time, and used it for field day, for logging and operating things like FT8. It's a great system, and that larger screen really comes in handy. So I like that. And of course, I included the battery chargers in here if I need it. It's in the case, along with either the 9700 or the 7300. There's room for one of those radios in this case. And that happens to be the 7300 right there. And all the cables that go with it. I've got the power cable. I've got a chunk of coax. I've even got the microphone. There's a USB cable. And I mentioned the power supplies in here. So all that's in that one single case. And it's a nice cushioned Pelican case that I had on hand. I didn't have to buy that now. I already had it. I've had it for, well over 20 years. It's been in my emergency communications. It was my Go kit many, many years ago. So that's my setup there. The antenna, that Comet antenna breaks down into a number of pieces, as you see here. I'm using a fishing rod holder. You can't quite see it. It's kind of dark here in this image, but this is a rod holder, little plastic tube that I can take all the pieces of the antenna except for the base section because it won't fit. But these are all the pieces of the antenna, and I can even stick the tools. You see a little stubby Phillips screwdriver, and I've got an 11/16 socket nut driver that goes in there with it. It all fits in that case, so I've got the tools with me. So it's two pieces, the whole antenna and base. If I count the stand, I've got three pieces for that whole setup. So really, really nice. It really makes it fast. And you notice the blue tape, painter's tape on here. I put the painter's tape on there to make it quick to set up. I talked about rapid deployment. I don't want to sit there with a tape measure and figure out how big the elements are supposed to be. I just put the tape on there. There's other ways I can do that. I probably could paint, put some paint on it or something. I had the painter's tape on hand. It was real easy to apply it. Made it great. Those are the only two pieces that I had to do that on. Everything else lines up with pre-drilled holes. There are two pieces that have a compression mounts, and so I just did that. Worked out just great for me. So real happy about the way that worked out. So the speaker stand, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. This is the fully assembled antenna with the speaker stand right there. It's a multi-band vertical, like you see. There's the stand, bungee corded to the battery box right there. And I said that weighs about 38 pounds, and that does a good job of holding it down. Now, the way I put this together, right here, the speaker stand itself has a swedged top on it. In other words, it's necked down to a smaller diameter. And it turns out that one of the military portable antenna masts that I have fits right over the top of it. It's perfect, nice, snug fit. And I happen to have one that had been damaged, and so I used that scrap of that damaged section. These are in 5-foot sections. I cut a piece off, bolted it down to the base of the CHA 250, and all I have to do is take that antenna and just slide it over the top of the speaker stand, and I don't have to do anything else with it. It just slips right on the top. And to further make it more convenient, I have a little OTTERBOX. If you're familiar with Otter, those are the guys that make cell phone cases like this one. I picked up this OTTERBOX, again, no expense. This came as a prize at one of our ham club meetings, and I picked that up at one of our club meetings. All the hardware goes in that little box right there. So all the screws, you can see, I'll show you the next picture. There's everything in the little box. Those are the screws that hold everything together, and a compression clamp. And there's even a lanyard on that box, and I tied the box to the speaker stand with the lanyard so I don't lose it. And the speaker stand has a little pin that goes into it that locks the thing before you clamp it down. It just locks the position, and that's on the lanyard as well. So I won't lose that. Everything is tied together using that lanyard. So I was really thrilled that I had that, and that made that part of the job a little bit easier. So everything is all tied together. And that's one piece. That's the stand, is one piece. All right, so the battery boxes I put together, there's the battery box. You can see it's a standard. It came from AutoZone, one of our local car parts places here in Ridgecrest. I've got my Optima AGM deep cycle. Those are the yellow tops inside there. I've got two of those. And I added a little rig runner on the top there, a little rig runner you see right there. And that allows me to run all my gear off of that. All my radios that run off of 12 volts, I have those Anderson power poles on everything. So that's why I use the rig runner there. That's a little West Mountain radio rig runner. I have those all over the place here. So that was something I had on hand. Didn't have to buy that now. It was something I'd already purchased. No expense there now. Got all of that set up with the Anderson power poles. And I also added a little a monitor that I had, again, Anderson power pole voltage and current monitor. And you can see that. You can't really see what that is, but it's right there in the middle. So it's in line with the battery. So I can see just what my battery voltage is if I'm concerned about that. And just in case, I added that inverter. I mentioned that it's a 200 watt, 115 volt DC to AC inverter. I can run other stuff on there if I need to. If I need to have a light or something, maybe, I don't know. It could be used for a number of things. But it's handy there just in case I run the batteries down on the computer, as I know they do have limited life, and I don't have spares to swap them out. The TOUGHBOOK, I can swap the batteries out. The Dell laptop I have, I can't swap the battery out. It's a permanently installed battery. Of course, other convenience items that go in that cart. What else do I have? I mentioned the folding chair. I've got that, so I can be comfortable. I've got that compact folding table. That table is a little folding table that rolls up. It's got legs that collapse down. Came out of Cabela's. Got that from Cabela's years ago. So again, those are things that I had on hand here. I didn't have to purchase. And of course, I've got a toolbox in there if I need it. In this case, it's not in the cart. It's sitting in my truck along with some other things if I do need them. But there's room in that cart for my toolbox if I do need it, because all the tools are there that I need to put everything, including the bungee cords. And of course, one of the things you don't want to forget putting in there are snacks and water. Very important to have that with you. So in conclusion, I want to kind of break this down. So the downsides of this whole thing is the overall system is pretty heavy. There's no doubt about that. And the batteries are by far the biggest contributor to the weight of the system. No question. And of course, batteries do require maintenance. I do have battery tenders that I connect them to when they're not in use to float them and keep the batteries maintained. Self-discharge. These batteries do tend to self-discharge, not that fast, but my experience with them here, where we live in the desert, where we're experiencing high temperatures in the summer and low temperatures in the winter. I've got these in my truck, and I know that if I don't drive the truck for a couple of weeks, the batteries will flatten out, which is why I use deep cycle batteries, so I don't really worry that much about it. But I run a tender on them and keep them maintained. What I could see in the future is a lightweight alternative, which would be using something like the lithium iron phosphate batteries. Those are great. I'd love to have a couple of 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphates, but that's a big expense. You're probably looking at least $1,000 for each of those batteries. And I wasn't really prepared to do that right now. I didn't see the need for that expense since I had the other stuff on hand. The Dell laptop, I love that Dell laptop. It's great. I've used that for years for portable use on field days, and I'm very happy with it. And of course, the 7300, I'm sold on that radio. It is a 100 watt radio, so of course it's going to have higher power consumption. So if I need to go longer, I may want to consider some different type of radio. But But again, the laptop, it's got that larger screen, 16-inch display. I can actually have a couple of windows open on the desktop. One option is I was thinking about is to carry along a second monitor, find another monitor that I could run at low voltage or even run off the inverter, and run that monitor so I could have two screens. I do run Winlink with two screens here at home. It makes it much, much easier. I can have multiple windows open and all of that simultaneously. So I do like that. Like I mentioned, a 7300 100-watt radio, and that's nice. The 9700 is also a little bit higher power radio than your average mobile radio, but there's a price to pay for that, is greater battery power consumption. So there's probably some other options, but I like the 7300 and 9700 because they're simple. I don't need any other stuff except for a USB cable. I don't need an interface like a Signal Link or something like that, and the cables that go with that. That was one of the advantages of the 7300. So as an alternative, if I want something in lower power consumption, and I've proven to myself that I can run low power and be effective, something like an IC705 might be something to try in the future. And I know folks are using those. That doesn't require any cables at all. So we got lower power consumption combined with one less cable, which means less stuff to carry around and set up. So low power, quicker to set up. You can't beat that. The 705 is a very, very compact radio. I could probably, and I think, I don't recall, I don't think that does 2 meters, but I may be wrong. I don't believe it does 2 meters. But that's something to consider. So my final thoughts. We do a lot of public service events here in our region. Most of those are equestrian events, although we do some public service events in town. But those equestrian events, horse rides, tend to be in remote areas around in the bush. We're surrounded by desert and mountains, so that's where the rides tend to take place. Our group, what we do is we handle health and welfare traffic for these events, as well as reporting horse rider information back to a command post or where the organizers are located from the various checkpoints located on the race course or the ride course. So each of the riders and their horse rider combination has a number assigned to them. We report the times and numbers back to our net control using typically 2 meters FM. And 2 meters FM is effective, but we've got some areas where coverage is kind of tough. We're up in the mountains. We might be back in a shadowed area. We use a local repeater where we can, but it may be shadowed from the repeater and may have to rely on relays and things like that. So again, there's that opportunity for error. And if the net gets really busy, if it's a big event, you're sitting around waiting for a long time to share your traffic with the net control. So it occurs to me, if we had a bunch of little portable Winlink stations that we could take out to those locations, we could collect all that information digitally, just type it in and send it to our command post, and not worry about having all the traffic on a local 2 meter net, because stuff can just get queued up. It's just email, right? It's just radio email. So we can send that to our command post. They can just cut and paste it into a spreadsheet and hand it to the race organizers. Great way to do it. We can collect the data in real time, which we're really not doing that right now. The data are delayed because we'll collect up a number of riders coming into a checkpoint and then send them out in batches. It's more efficient that way, but it does delay the data. Using digital communications might reduce the workload on the coordinators too. So we're just entering the data on the computer and sending it right out to our coordinator, the race coordinator. So it's an effective, maybe an effective way to go in the future. I don't know. We'll see. It's just a thought. Anyway, that's it. This is my adventure in putting together the Winlink station. I'm really happy with the results. My back isn't, but I am. it's turned out to be very effective, and I now have a nice, quickly deployable portable Winlink station. So I'm going to look for questions and comments, and you can put those in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll get on with that. So thank you very much. Appreciate your time. Appreciate everyone here. Appreciate all the questions and comments that we've gotten, and turn it back over to Dan. So it's W60Q signing out for now.